may not get as many people as had initially registered for this. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kelly Crane. For those of you who I don't know already, I am the Executive Director of the Oregon Farmers Markets Association, and we organized this call today to help bring in a little technical assistance around some of the production and marketing terminology that you'll hear your vendors and customers use at farmers markets. One of the reasons we felt like this was really important is because we've got a lot of new market managers and new board members this year at farmers markets. COVID hit our markets really hard in terms of turnover. And so we know some of you guys might be new, some of you guys might be returning, but we could all use a refresher because these are complicated terms. So I'll introduce John in a few minutes, who is going to do a presentation for us today. We're also going to record this webinar, have these slides available, and produce a glossary of terms afterwards for you guys to refer to if needed. So if you don't catch something on the call today, we're gonna get it all pretty well documented. So next slide. Amanda, our programs manager, also wants to tell you about some events that we have coming up soon. Amanda?
Yeah, we have a couple more diversity, equity, inclusion sessions with Aorta coming up. Our spring session had to be postponed, and we're setting a new date for next month with our facilitator, and the fall session is scheduled for September 9th. The first session is about what to do when you've heard, seen, or done something racist and not known exactly what to say. And the second session is for strategizing new ways to structure our organizations that increase racial equity and center market leadership and vendors of color. We're also going to be bringing back, you can sign up for register for those at our website at the workshops section of the website. We're also going to be bringing back the monthly peer-to-peer sessions so that you can all talk to each other and share the expertise that you already know out to other market operators. It's a chance to ask what's working and what didn't work and bring back those lessons from each other to your own market. We'll pick a topic that's either seasonal for what's usually happening for markets or what we hear from you is emerging as a need. These Zoom sessions are going to be scheduled on the first Wednesday of the month, and we'll send announcements and reminders through our Market Manager Facebook group and the Oregon Markets listserv and an email blast, but we can also add you to a calendar invite. So let us know if you want that by putting your email in the chat.
Thanks, Amanda. And then just some quick housekeeping rules. Most of you guys have been on these calls already, so it's going to be a little boring, but bear with us. So for those of you who are introverts, you are free to turn your camera off if you do not want to be on camera. To help keep background noise to a minimum, just mute your microphone when you're not speaking. It's the little icon right now. It's at the bottom left of your screen. It's probably red with a cross through it. If it's green, you are not muted, so click on it. You'll be able to see both the speaker and the slides during the presentation, so you can play around with your view settings. Those options are typically at the top right of your screen. The black part of your screen, not the chat if you've expanded the chat. If you have questions before the end of the talk and you don't want to forget it, we don't want you to forget it. You can just put it in the chat box, and Amanda, who you just heard from, will be our chat box manager for the day, and she will make sure that that question doesn't gloss and will call on you later to ask your questions or send it along to the presenter. So thanks, Amanda. If you're having any technical issues during the workshop, send questions through the chat box to our communications coordinator, Hannah, and she will help you out. Thank you, Hannah. Jan says, see, Janet has not going to put her video on because she has her hair in a towel, and that's valid, Jan. So chat is at the bottom of your screen. When you chat, make sure your kind of default is to send it to everyone. Make sure you send it to the right person. Also know that we can see these chats at the end. So if you have anything you'd like to communicate you don't want us to overhear, you should save that for a different time and place. Okay, I think that that's it. So next slide. Yeah, okay. So we're going to turn this over to John Porter now. I will let him introduce himself, and he is going to share his own slides. I've known John for a long time, even before I lived here in Oregon, and he is a garden guru. And so I immediately thought of him for help with this terminology. He's also very entertaining. No pressure, John. So we invited him here today. I will let you take it from here, John.
Well, thanks, Kelly. Kelly and I know each other from West Virginia. I'm originally from West Virginia, and she was working there, and I helped with a program that we were doing to train beginning farmers and help with the curriculum and did teaching. And I think Kelly reached out to me to teach this because I can remember I did one workshop. I can't remember if it was like seed starting or something else. And we were talking about, picking the right kind of seeds. And like I was talking like, what's the difference between heirlooms and hybrids and GMOs, and like explain what everything was. And like, I think there was like an hour of questions about all of that afterward. And so that's why I'm here. I'm now in Nebraska. So I'm the urban agriculture educator for Nebraska Extension. I'm located in beautiful downtown Omaha. Totally different from the mountains of West Virginia. It's kind of flat and corny here. But we do have Warren Buffett. So we have that going for us. So I am going to share my screen here, and we will be off. So the way that we wanted to talk today was to share some of these marketing terms, production terms that you may hear used. And so you will be, I guess, have a better understanding of what those actually mean for both your producers and consumers. And that can be helpful if you have consumers that reach out and say, hey, I am looking for this, or I need this, or maybe you're creating some sort of directory or guide to your producers, and they list a certain word or type of production on their application form or whatever, and you don't understand it. So we'll go through those, and the way we'll sort of start talking is by those things that like actually have an official definition, like a certification program. But then we'll talk about things that don't have some sort of official definition, and what those commonly mean and how they might be interpreted, and what you should do with those. As we get started, I want to know, what have you seen used, common terms, uncommon terms, or maybe terms that you don't understand. What terms have you seen used to describe produce or products at the market? And you can type this in the chat, and we'll see if any of those pop up in the presentation, and we can even add those to the discussion if there are things that we need to add. So I see, Hannah's already added natural, organic, local, non-GMO. So a lot of those things we're going to talk about. Certified naturally grown, that's one we'll talk about. And so we're going to talk about some of these things and what they actually mean. And so we can, feel free to ask questions. We will sort of follow up at the end with all of those, because I think we scheduled like 25 to 30 minutes for me to talk, and then time for questions. And I have like 25 slides. So we're going to like, if you remember those old commercials for Micro Machines, if you're like old enough to remember like those tiny little cars and the guy talked really fast, I'm going to try to be the Micro Machines man, but talk as quickly and I guess efficiently and understandably as possible. And so, we see all of these terms: organic, natural, non-GMO, GMO, and they all may have different definitions. And I think a lot of people maybe don't understand, especially those ones that don't have an official definition or a certification. And so we're going to talk about what those really can mean. What do those really mean to us as markets, as producers, as consumers, and how do we make sure that there's the understanding between producers and consumers to make sure that the message is getting across. So to start off with some of the common certification programs, of course, the one almost everyone will probably know is certified organic. This is by the USDA, the federal government, and it follows the National Organic Program standards as set by the USDA. It is a legal term. You have to be certified by a certification agency, usually some sort of third-party agency that is approved to certify organic. We'll talk about what organic production is in a minute. And it includes the use of just the simple term organic. So even if it's not certified organic, someone that uses the term organic must be certified organic unless they sell less than $5,000 worth of product per year. And then they're sort of in this I guess, legal gray area where it's not required for them to use certification. They still have to follow all the guidelines, but they don't have to go through the process of certification. Another similar certification is certified naturally grown. This is actually created as an alternative to certified organic or organic. That is a lower cost and less paperwork version. And it says, like, right on their website that it is an alternative to organic certification. And it uses the same exact standards. So it uses the NOP standards that are required for organic, but you cannot use the term organic in describing the produce. It can be certified naturally grown as the actual official word that a producer who is certified through this program can use. And it basically means the same thing. And so if you have, say, a customer that says, I want someone who's producing organically, you would ask them, do you officially want certified organic, or do you want using the standards? And I see NOP, National Organic Program. That's the set of standards. That's the law that organic must follow. And we'll talk a little bit about what organic means. Yes, Kelly, you're right. It's peer-to-peer. A lot of these, other than organic, are peer-to-peer. And that means that it can be farmer to farmer. It doesn't have to be an agency. And the main difference is that cost and paperwork. Certified naturally grown was created to cost less and to have less paperwork. You just can't use the term certified organic. So you might see Demeter USA certification. That's certified biodynamic. And we'll talk a bit about more about what biodynamic means, because I think that's one of the really misunderstood terms. This company certifies biodynamic. So if it's not certified by Demeter, the farm cannot use the term biodynamic. That's something that I learned. I didn't realize until I was putting together this information. It incorporates organic and ecological production with what some would describe as mystical practices or spiritual practices, where they're actually using these preparations, and I'll explain what those are a little bit later as well. They're certified animal welfare approved, which is a livestock programming program that certifies livestock and it has to be outdoor pasture raised. It has to have humane slaughter, and there must be sustainable production practices used in that. A new one that is relatively new that I just found, and no one that from the association knew this either. I think it was just developed in 2019. And regenerative is a term we'll describe a little bit later, but it is a certification for regenerative agriculture. It incorporates organic standards along with soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness. So it's really interesting that all of these that we've talked about so far use the same National Organic Program standards it's the same standards, but they add their own twist to them. So for biodynamic, it's those sort of energy preparations that you add. And then being on the West Coast, you also have salmon safe certification. For West Coast, it can be farms, vineyards, even cities, and it's used to reduce impacts to streams, oceans through the use of organic type practices. So it's especially geared for farms that are along rivers or that are upstream of salmon fisheries. And so that can be another one that you see as well. I see chat from Kelly, yes. Regenerative, as far as I know, you can use that without being ROC certified because the term came along before the type of certification and was already in use. And then some others that you may, wouldn't maybe advertise, but you might see producers say that they're Produce Safety Alliance grower trained, which means that they've gone through a training about FSMA training, which is Food Safety Modernization Act. Any farm that sells more than $25,000 of covered produce a year, that's any produce that is generally consumed raw, or really any produce, if they sell raw produce that's eaten raw, like leafy greens, etc., they will be covered by the rule. If anyone less than 25,000 is exempt, but they must notify consumers that they're exempt with a sign and their address. And that just went into effect, like there was like a grace period, and now that's in effect. And so if they haven't gone through that training, they may want to think about going through that training. That's offered through Cornell, but it's offered in every state. We actually have one, your trainer supervisor person actually is my former colleague and lives here in Nebraska. She's leaving that position, but there is that. And then GAP certification is Good Agricultural Practices. It's a voluntary certification that can be used to meet those FSMA standards. And so those are things that you might see related to food safety. So what is organic, this NOP? So this is like the very brief, and there's more information when I send out that glossary, that website. Only approved organic inputs, which means that there are organically improved pesticides and fertilizers that you can use. You can't use anything that would be conventional. You can't use genetically engineered crops. There is a certification process that has to go through that does cost money and does take time because you have to keep records and certify that you haven't had any conventional inputs on the land for at least 3 years. And note that the whole farm does not have to be certified. So if you're only wanting to grow certain spots or certain crops organically, you can grow those out separately. You don't have to certify the entire farm. You can have specific plots of land on the farm to certify organically. So any of these certifications, if a farmer lists that as like their type of production, they should be able to provide some sort of certificate saying that they are certified and approved to sell produce that is labeled in that manner. One of the big misunderstandings that we often get, and this can help you with consumers and producers, is that organic does not mean pesticide free. There are lots of organic pesticides that are naturally derived from biological sources or from mineral sources that can be used for diseases and insects. So organic doesn't necessarily mean pesticide free. And so you might want to clarify that with the consumer. If they're saying, I want organic or I want pesticide free, just know that, and that's a common misconception. I get at least 1 or 2 surprised gasps when I mention that during a presentation. So these are some common production terms that we hear used that are not certified. So this means that they don't have an official definition. That means that they are open to interpretation by the producer and the consumer. And so if you are talking to a producer or they're filling out paperwork and they list these things, you might want to follow up with them to ask exactly what they mean when they use these terms. So like I said, to use the term certified organic or organic, you must be certified. Sometimes people will use the term organically grown. If they're not certified, it's sort of like a legal gray area. I think you can use it. I don't know that anyone will come after you if you use it. But definitely you can't use organic, just organic. It has to be organically grown. So there's no official definition of this. So it can be taken meaning to use those organic standards from the National Organic Program, or whatever the producer considers to be organic, or what the consumer thinks organic is. And so you might want to ask them, if they list organically grown, what do they mean? And are they certified or are they not? There's also natural, naturally grown, all natural. There's no official or standard definition for these terms unless you're using that certified naturally grown certification, which is basically organic. So it's generally taken to mean organically grown or only with naturally derived inputs. But once again, you would want to ask the producer what exactly they mean, or what the consumer, exactly what they're looking for. And so I see, though these uncertified production terms mean that no third party is verifying that the producers are being truthful or not about their practices correct. Yes. And so this is about, that relationship that you have with the producer to know, are they being truthful about what they're saying, or the relationship between the consumer and the producer. And that's a little bit harder, especially if you're in a bigger area and you can't just, drive out to the farm. I think Kelly used the example when we were talking about this, like where we're from in West Virginia, there's this farmer who, he will not get certified organic, but he grows organically. And he will say, well, if you want to come see what I do, just come out and pop out onto the front porch and I'll show you my farming and we'll have a drink. And so we can't really have all the consumers going to the farm like that. And so these terms, are open, what I would say, open to interpretation. And there's no one really policing what these things are. So sustainable or sustainably grown. So there's no certification or standard definition. A lot of times people use this to refer to a focus on the earth or on environmental impacts. There is an official definition of sustainable agriculture that a lot of people don't realize. And it's basically a balance between the farmer people, the environment, and profitability. So it's sort of like a social, environmental, and profitability balance. So a give or take on all of those. But there isn't a certifying agency. There's nothing that says, this is certifiably sustainable. Regenerative, we talked about that certification process. As of right now, you can still use this term without certification. It does so focus on soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness, with the aim to reverse climate change and environmental impacts. And those new certifications are available, but the term, like I said, is not restricted. Sometimes people use these terms interchangeably, the sustainable and regenerative. Regenerative has more of a focus on environment versus sustainable, and sustainable ag might have more of a focus on that balance between profit and environment. Common production terms, so pesticide free. That one's pretty simple to understand. That's grown without the use of any pesticides, including organic approved pesticides. You might see people use the term chemical free. They usually mean pesticide free, but you would want to clarify that to see exactly what they mean, because it can be misunderstood or misinterpreted. And the term that I would use would be like scientifically inaccurate, because everything is made of chemicals. So you would just want to certify with them that, yes, is this what you mean, pesticide free? So that if a consumer asks for pesticide free, we can make sure that we understand what the term really means. And then the biodynamic. So like I said, according to the Demeter USA website, you're supposed to be certified by Demeter to use this term. Do they police that? I'm not sure. Because like Kelly said in the chat, I've seen lots of other people use this term, and I don't see that certification label on there. So typically it's a natural and ecological production. So it starts with the NOP, National Organic Program Guidelines, and it adds a few other things that even followers of the practice, and this started actually in my research, I learned a little bit more about this. It started in 1924 in Oregon. There was this doctor that sort of lectured about his practices, and they included what would be described as these mystical preparations. And I actually found a list of them. So it's like burying a cow horn full of manure into the soil for a year and letting it age to like align the energy of the manure. And then you use it holistically. And then some herbs packed into the bladder of an animal that is decomposed. And so it's interesting that the certification requires the use of these. And so I think a lot of people think that biodynamic just means like super special organic, but there are actual like specific official requirements for it that Demeter says you have to be certified in order to use the term. And so some terms around types of plants. And I think this is one of the things that Kelly really wanted me to talk about was like, what are the difference between like hybrids and GMOs and genetic engineered and all that? And so hybrid is something that is the offspring between two genetically different parent varieties that have been just crossbred through traditional breeding. And so you have parent one and parent two, and you take them and you cross pollen onto the flower of the female, and you've created this, usually with specific traits from the father and the mother plant. Whereas genetic engineering is we're taking the genetically material from one species and mechanically inserting that into the genome of another. And it usually adds things like insect resistance, herbicide resistance, even adding extra nutrients to things. And so there's, I think, misconception that a hybrid is a GMO, et cetera. And genetically engineered is the scientifically, scientific way to explain what a GMO is. That's the process. Then we also hear heirloom, which is a type of open pollinated plant. Open pollinated means that you can save seeds and they breed true. So if you have this tomato and you save the seed from it, that's typically the seed that you're going to get, the plant that you're going to get is what you saved. A hybrid means that you're going to get a mix of things, and we'll talk about that in a second. And an heirloom is an open pollinated variety that's been maintained over years. It has a history from a family, from a region, or it's been around for a long time. And another term that we might hear used is cultivar and variety, and there's actually lots of things in between. And I found this fun little graphic. So naturally occurring means that someone went out and they found it in nature and they started growing it because they liked it. And that's a variety, or a land race is sometimes referred to. That's a slightly different thing. But a variety is something someone went out and it's naturally occurring, or sometimes we use it to refer to an heirloom. A cultivar and a hybrid on the other end are things that have been made by a human crossbreeding things. So the hybrid is a cultivar. And so those are things that they're used interchangeably, and it doesn't really matter if you mix them up. But hybrid and heirloom, variety, cultivar, all of those things are sort of interlaced there. And so when we talk about, those hybrids, and that what we would call selective breeding is another term that we use for things that include hybridizing, but also just selecting things for specific traits, and then it eventually ends up to be something interesting. So there's this weed that grows in the Mediterranean region called Brassica oleracea. I can't speak today. My Latin is off. Oleraceae. And in certain regions, people saved seeds from the plants that had a big head on it, and it turned into cabbage, and maybe little heads and turned into Brussels sprouts. And there's kohlrabi, kale, broccoli, cauliflower. They're actually all the same exact species, but they were selected through selective breeding and saving the seeds from that one plant. And so that's one thing. And you can actually cross any of these. If you've seen in catalogs the last few years, there's new cultivars of like broccoli, which is like little broccoli heads on top of a kale plant, or flower sprouts, which is like the flowering cabbage on a Brussels sprouts stem. So you can find all kinds of interesting things. And then all of these types of squash are all the same species as well, and we don't think about that. So we have like the zucchini and the pumpkin, the same plant. And so if we were to hybridize them, we would take the genes from the zucchini and the genes from the pumpkin and cross them, and we would get what we would call maybe a puccini. This is actually something that a master gardener brought to me that came out of their garden. They saved the seeds from their pumpkin, and this is what grew. And they brought it to me for identification. What is this? And it's like your pumpkin and zucchini hybridized. And I did taste test it, and it tasted awful. And so we have things like that. What happens? So the question is, are hybrids GMOs? True or false? So I sort of hinted at this. It's actually false. So we have people that will say, well, I can't go to buy like a packet of tomatoes at the box store because they could be GMOs, or all of those hybrids are GMOs. And that's actually false because it uses a different technology. I'm not going to get into the deep of it, but here's hybridization, where we take, we have the parents up here, the blue parent and the green parent, and we cross them, and then we get this F1 generation, which is our hybrid, and they have genes from both parents in there. And so you get like a standard, like if you've ever grown celebrity tomatoes, which is like a very common tomato that everyone grows, it's like every celebrity tomato is the same because of this. Now, if you were to save the seeds from this hybrid, you would get all kinds of mix. So you would get, if you ever remember from like high school biology class, a Punnett square, where you get all of these different things, and you get, the round yellow peas and the squishy dry green peas. And so you get that mix of things from hybrids if you save the seeds. Genetic engineering, on the other hand, we would take one gene from our plant or whatever that we're wanting to add in. There's different techniques for this, and it's not as like, space age as you think. So instead of like having to cross everything and wait years and years and years to see if it's really what we're wanting to add, like maybe we're adding disease resistance, you would have to cross hundreds of plants to add disease resistance and take years and years. Whereas the scientists could take this and add the gene and be done with like a month. And so there's different types of technology that are used in that. But that's a little bit of what it is. And it's not like, like a monster in the lab kind of thing. It's really like, I've done it like as a student. We actually created some for like this model plant that no one wants to grow. It's actually a weed. But the thing to keep in mind, no matter what the technology, and there's lots of controversy around genetic engineering, even though there's lots of good things like the insect resistance, and especially in other countries, reducing pesticide use. The things to know about genetic engineering and GMO crops, if you have a consumer that calls up and says, I'm looking for non-GMO tomatoes, guess what? You have an easy answer for that. And so to think about it, not typically available to small producers in small quantities. Most farmers market producers probably aren't on the scale that they would have GMOs. Most produce crops that we grow do not have a GMO version. And I'll share a slide in a second to show you what is actually GMO at the moment. And a producer can't accidentally get a GMO crop to sell. They would have to sign a contract because it's a patented thing that they would have, and they have to sign a contract to say they're not going to save it, or they're not going to share it, or they're not going to try to introduce that gene into like the wild population. And so it would be very impossible for a small producer of fruits and vegetables to sell GMO produce. Where it might come into play at a farmer's market is if we have a meat producer that they might be feeding corn and soybeans, and those are the crops that are mainly genetically engineered. And so here's an actual list of the things that are available as a GMO in the United States. You'll see that most of them are commodity crops that we would not sell at a farmer's market: canola, alfalfa, field corn, soybeans, sugar beets, cotton. Those are the big ones, and those are the major. That's probably like 90% of the GMO crops available. There are a few that would be considered produce quality plants. Like I said, they're not very common, very small percentage of sales, and the farmer would have to buy a large quantity and sign a contract. Those things are potatoes, and apples. So there's actually a new process where they're not adding genes, but knocking out a gene that keeps them from browning and spoiling so fast, which is exciting new technology for food waste. And then there's some sweet corn and summer squash, mostly for disease resistance, or adding the BT gene, which is like a common organic pesticide that's used, and you can actually have, summer squash that is resistant to squash beetle, which is exciting for a lot of producers. But if someone calls up and says, I want a non-GMO tomato, there are no tomatoes on this list. There are no GMO tomatoes, radishes, lettuce, none of these things are GMO. So you really aren't going to have GMO products at a farmer's market. A lot of producers will use that as a marketing term. I'll say that it started off as this campaign when genetic engineering was first starting and we had GMOs, that there was a lot of fear around it. So some companies started using it as like a marketing campaign, but now it's sort of like, I don't know how to describe it. It doesn't really mean a lot because there's really not anything genetically engineered that a farmer at a farmer's market would be selling. And you see the label on everything now, like salt and water, like things that would not be GMO. And so we have those labels that appear everywhere, but you can basically assure producers and consumers that there aren't going to be GMOs at the market. And so I don't know why that disappeared, but there we go. So you can, the ways to connect with me: email, Twitter, some web pages. And I know we have questions that we can pop up to. So I do see in the chat, yeah, so if someone's selling processed foods, it could be like soy or canola oil that, would have that on there. If we're selling like straight fresh produce, there really wouldn't be a lot or anything that a small vegetable producer would have that would be there. And most things at the farmer's market, like I said, don't have a GMO version. So the only thing is potatoes, corn, and squash. Are organic certified products non-GMO? Yes, that is a requirement for organic certification, and for I think any of those certifications that use those same standards, is that you can't use genetic engineering. I know there have been some questions about that recently, about reevaluating it, because there are several of the genetically engineered crops that are actually made to reduce pesticide use, like insect resistance, etc. I don't know, where that's going to land, if those might be added, but there are genetic GMOs that are made to reduce pesticide use as well.
John, are we ready for our Q&A? Are we switching over to Q&A now?
Yes, I think so. I'm ready to go.
Great. So it sounds like, just to clarify, Nicole made such a good point. If your market has adopted a policy that you don't want any GMO products in your market, for example, say your board has set those standards for your market, what you really need to worry about as a market manager would not be any sort of like fresh produce or tree nuts or anything like that. It would be probably the only place you would really be seeing that would be in your prepared or foods or baked goods, any sort of like prepared or processed foods.
And meat vendors who, depending on how strict you want to be, what kind of feed meat vendor is using.
And John, is it safe to assume that anybody who's not feeding organic certified feed, it is likely that the feed has GMO grain or corn involved?
Yes, I would say that's probably a good chance because there's such a high percentage of genetically engineered corn and soy being used that if it's not certified organic feed, that it probably does have genetically engineered feed. And so really that, that would be the policy, like how far back do you go? Is it because the animals themselves are not genetically engineered? There's actually been work done on salmon, but I don't know that it's been certified yet. So it's not out there. And I think it's made to like convert nutrients better. Like it's supposed to have like higher nutrient levels from what I understand.
So there is a genetically or a genetically modified animal product that may be on the market sometime in the near future that policy wise your market will need to consider whether or not you are interested in hosting those types of vendors, correct?
Yes, that is correct. But as for like beef or pork or chicken, there are no genetically engineered versions of those animals.
Let's open it up for other questions. Hannah, do we have a prettier slide for the questions than this?
Yeah, John, could you stop sharing your screen so I can?
Oh yeah.
No problem.
Sorry.
Thanks so much.
John, your slides were lovely, but we didn't need the Windows screen. Who else has questions? Amanda, did we miss anybody's questions in the chat? John was doing such a great job of answering them as we went.
Yeah, we got all of them. So we're ready for more.
Yeah, you guys could just click a reaction button. You could raise your hand, or there's not very many of us. So if you just wanted to unmute yourself and ask a question, you can go ahead.
This is Ecole. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much. And I'm just curious if you're willing, like I do a lot of presenting on sustainability, and it would be so helpful to just have a reference to some of the more modern updated slides, like the I forget what it was called, Certified Natural. I had not heard of that, so that's very cool. So I'm just wondering if you're willing to share your slides with us.
Yes. So the association already has the slides and also a glossary that will have links. So I actually provided links to all the certification websites for all of them. And so that will be sent out, and they'll be sending out the recording. So that'll be an email that is forthcoming with all of that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Nicole. And were there any terms that you were hoping to learn about that you didn't? Because we can add those to the glossary. Is there anybody who didn't get a term answer?
I think one that I saw when I asked the question in the beginning was local. What does local mean? And really that one is one that is like up for interpretation and would be set by the market. Like, is that like within the county, within like a region? Is it within 50 miles, 100 miles, 250 miles? And I think sometimes that is also determined by like how much production of certain things you actually have in an area. Like I know, like there are some markets where I know it would be like for produce, it's like within, like 50 miles, but for meat products that they don't have a lot of producers, it might be 250 that they would set that.
That's a good point. So John, you should assume like newer market managers, if you're like, what's local? Your market probably has a definition of that. If not, you should have some geographic boundaries that you consider, and that will be different for every market, basically. Does anyone want to share their market's definition of local?
I'm happy to. I think we say within 250 miles of Portland because we are a Washington bordered state. So we don't want to exclude Washington as local.
Yeah. Anyone else? Just unmute yourself and share. Okay. That's fine. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
I could add maybe for new market managers, something to look for is that I had mostly this was the staff at vendor booths, so not the owners or the main farmer, but the staff maybe not exactly knowing what they were saying when they were using some of these terms, especially one vendor talking about if a customer would come up and say what kind of practices do you use? And they'd be like, well, we're GAP certified, good agricultural, can't remember, John, what is GAP?
Agricultural practices.
Practices. And they would say that as if like, that means we're organic. And that's what the customer would walk away with thinking. And I remember having to re-explain to those staff and then call their owner in to say, you can't say that when someone is asking about organic and those kind, that's just a safety designation, not a organic practices designation. So something to look at, market managers should look out for people saying that.
It sounds like you're suggesting, Amanda, too, that this could be a training tool that you could give to your vendors to help educate their staff, because you're going to assume your vendors are able to talk intelligently about this, you hope, but maybe not have all of their staff. So that's a good suggestion. I see too, Lisa asked, she said she has farmers who grow in greenhouses. She's asking if this is considered hothouse. I'm curious, Lisa, could you clarify, are these hydroponic growers? Do you know? Or are they do they just do like seasonal?
So I'm a brand new farmers market liaison. So, and just toured these two farms. And so please forgive my ignorance on some of this. One of them grows he grows tomatoes, and he grows all of it in perlite. There's no dirt, no fertilizer, just perlite and water. It's phenomenal. It's something I guess they do in the Netherlands. And then the other one grows cucumbers, and he grows them in boxes of pea gravel using koi fish on one end, and the water from the koi fish and their excrement fertilizes through the water and goes down through the pea gravel, and they grow them on these vines and they stretch the vines back and forth. It's really phenomenal, but they don't use any fertilizer, no dirt, no chemicals. And they told me they couldn't be called organic because they don't use dirt. And but it's a real sterile environment. It's just fascinating. But one of my customers asked me, oh, is that hothouse? Are they hothouse tomatoes and cucumbers? And I just didn't have an answer. So that's kind of where my question comes from.
John, that's a lot to unpack. I know you can hydroponic, hothouse, greenhouse, organic certified, go for it.
So hothouse is like an old-timey term for greenhouse production. So yes, you could tell them that is, that's what they were asking, like, are they greenhouse grown? And so yes. So the first system that you described is hydroponics. So they're using a fertilizer base. And the second one you described is called aquaponics, where you're using fish as a nutrient source. If you look right here over my shoulder, you'll see my goldfish tank, and then the water pumps up and feeds my kale and other leafy greens up top. So there's my aquaponic system right behind me there. And so those are different types of greenhouse production. So you can tell them that it's hothouse, that it's greenhouse, that it's hydroponic or aquaponic. And very interesting fact that I just learned this morning in an email is that, there are different food safety issues around hydroponics and aquaponics and greenhouse grown stuff because of all the water that's used. And if you know anyone that has gone through that Produce Safety Alliance training, you'll know that we talk a lot about water. I'm a certified trainer for that. And so I usually get stuck doing the water and talking about E. coli and stuff like that. And so there is now a new food safety certification for specifically hydroponic and greenhouse and aquaponic grown produce. That's called, so that type of production is called Controlled Environment Agriculture, CEA for short. So if people might not say I'm a greenhouse grower, I'm a CEA grower. And so there is a CEA certification, a food safety certification that just like launched today. Like I just learned this. And Lisa, you're correct. There was a big fight recently with organic standards and hydroponics. And basically, the fight was about that, organic production is a lot about soil stewardship, but also about the inputs, making sure that, they're all naturally derived. And so there were people supporting including hydroponics and aquaponics in organic because you can do it using all natural inputs. But there was a bigger faction fighting against that since it didn't use soil. So as of right now, I don't believe that anyone that's growing hydroponically and probably aquaponically can be certified organic.
Lisa, I was just going to ask you, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. And, just the more information I think I have, I'll be better equipped to answer the customers' questions, because not all my farmers can come to market. We're having, they're out farming and having a little difficulty getting workers to come to market and sell for them. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do is get some of the FFA kids out in partnership to work the booths for the farmers or get workers for them. So me being able to explain what it is going to be real helpful.
Great, Lisa. And it sounds like we should add the terms greenhouse, hothouse, hydroponic, and aquaponic to our glossary since that question has come up. We tend to not really think about that, so that's great. Jan has a question. Is there a requirement for a vendor to post that their product has been sprayed? Strawberries, for instance.
So I'm assuming that you mean like using pesticides or like sprayed with some sort of like preservative.
Probably pesticides is what she means, John.
Yes. So there is no requirement for that. So that would be like a market rule. So if you wanted to make sure that there were no pesticides used, you would make that as a market rule. But even certified organic, any of those that use the certified organic standards, they allow the use of organically derived pesticides. And if they're not certified organic, then there's no requirement that they state that there is a treatment. Basically using the logic that there is a label on the pesticide that is a legal binding document that the producer has to follow. It's illegal for them to use a pesticide other than how it's stated on the label. And that label use, like the use stated on the label, is basically the research to say this is how you use it to provide minimal risk to human health, and also now even like pollinator or environmental issues. And so there's no requirement for a producer to say that they do or do not use pesticides on their produce.
Yeah. And to be clear, John, there's no requirement that an organic grower post anything. If an organic grower were to spray pyrethrins on their crops to control an insect population. Pyrethrins are a class of allowable naturally derived pesticides under the National Organic Program. So if an organic grower sprayed a crop of strawberries with pyrethrins to control a pesticide population, they would have standards with the National Organic Program about how long they had to then wait to feed, to sell that to that crop to the public.
Yes.
But they would not have any sort of requirements for notifying the public they'd sprayed that crop, correct?
Correct. And so those actually are all listed on the specific pesticide label on that product as well. And it is like illegally binding. Like if a producer is not following this, they could be fined or imprisoned for not using the label and using the product correctly. And it will say on there, like if you spray this, then you have to wait this many days for harvest, etc. And so that is so that will break down. Almost every pesticide breaks down relatively quickly in the environment. And so even ones that have conventional pesticides used, if you were to test those after that waiting period, there would be like very little residue left on those.
Jan, when you say vendor wars, can you explain a little? Is a vendor insisting that another vendor needs to post that they spray their products with conventional pesticides?
She might be drying her hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like there's no requirement that they would have to post what they're spraying. And technically you should always be telling everyone to wash all produce. That is something that, should be standard. And, as a food safety trainer, there are actually times when we tell produce vendors not to pre-wash produce because it actually shortens the lifespan. And water, as I said, is something that can introduce contaminants to produce. So you should always be telling all consumers to wash all produce, no matter if it's organic, pesticide-free, etc.
That's correct. Jan, I don't know any market that requires their vendors to post any sort of spray schedule for their pesticide applications. That's not to say there aren't any. And if somebody on here has a market that does that, please let me know. But I would say it is not a common thing to require as a market. That would be something you could require as a market, but it is not anything that there's no legal requirement that they do that, or certification program that requires that either. Even organic standards don't require you to post a public spray schedule.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So the farmer should be keeping a record of what they spray and when they spray. So if there is an issue, there would be like traceability. But as for posting, no.
So it's 3:01. Well, where I am, it's noon 01 where you are. Sorry, guys. So John has kindly offered to answer some follow-up questions for this group that sat through this lovely presentation today. So thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, John, and thank you so much for offering in advance to answer some questions. Also, we are going, like John said, and we mentioned, we are going to push out this recording, a link to the glossary, and also a copy of the slides John provided. So you'll have 3 different ways of interacting with this material. But if for some reason you lose it or whatever, give Amanda a holler. There's her email address right there, but you guys probably have it already. And yeah, so we hope this is helpful to you. If you want to put any thank yous to John in the chat, it would be lovely to do so. John, anything you want to say before we take off?
No, I think I've talked for almost an hour, so.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.